All right, so today I'm going to start with a conversation about the oral arguments. Now, first off, I do apologize for leaving y'all on mute last class. That's on me. Haven't done it in a semester and a half of online teaching, and apparently my streak ran to a close. So I apologize. I will be re-recording that last 10 minutes to make sure that everybody kind of understands what was said. But to start today, what we're going to do is talk about the oral arguments and the things that people across the board need to improve upon. And before I go any further, I expect there to be need for improvement, right? It would be very weird, and I'd have several questions if you came in and did this thing perfectly as if you were a lawyer in front of the Supreme Court. Okay? I always kind of view the initial oral argument as more of a test run so you can understand what it is. Because I know that whenever, the first time I interrupt people to ask a question during an oral argument, there's always this like deer in headlights look that people get because they just don't know what the heck's happening. They don't know how to respond. They don't know anything like that. So that is understandable. And my hope today is to help you guys move beyond that. First thing that I always found, or that I really found with this class in particular, is you want to really understand what the law is. I asked every single one of you guys, is Michael Scott a public figure or is he a private figure? And that should be a pretty simple question, right? It should be a pretty simple answer. And that's because when I'm asking you why is he a public figure versus a private figure, I'm asking you, well, what standard are we looking at here? Are we going to be applying an actual malice standard? Or are we going to be applying are we going to be applied a pure negligence standard? Because, and you should know which one is good for your side, right? You should know that if you are representing Michael Scott in the EEOC, you want defamation to be found here. You want it to be easier to win, in which case Michael Scott's a private figure. If you are representing the newspaper and the journalist, you want him to be a public figure because then it is harder for him to win, right? Those are the kind of basic things that just know what is good for your case and what is bad. Also kind of have a firm grasp on the law. I don't expect you guys to have it memorized. You are allowed to use notes, and that is okay, and I expect you guys to use notes. But what I don't expect, but you want to be able to quickly reference them, and you need to be able to have a firm enough grasp on the law where you can quickly find what you're looking for and be able to answer my questions. The other thing you really want to be thinking about is how this is a bigger picture. You know, you also want to be thinking about the bigger picture. Let me give you the example of whether or not Ms. Strum should be forced to turn over her documents, over her sources to the EEOC. If your position is that Ms. Strum should be required to turn over her sources, then you need to be able to tell me what your rule is, right? Is she turning over her sources because we're in a civil case and civil cases have less to do with journalistic freedoms, or should we be looking at a criminal case? Like, you should not only be able to tell me whether or not Ms. Strum should be forced to turn over her sources, but you should be able to tell me why that's the case. And you should tell me how, like a general rule, like how should other similar cases be treated as well. So you always want to have that kind of big picture environment as well. Some more nitty gritty stuff. I will not be interrupting you, and a judge usually does not interrupt you within the first 30 seconds of your argument. And so you want to be able to use that 30 seconds effectively. I heard both of these versions, and I'm not trying to call anybody specific out, but I heard both of these versions during the oral argument. I had some people say, today we're here to discuss the importance of journalistic freedoms in the United States and the ability for abusers and people guilty of sexual misconduct in the workplace to be held to account. And for the following reasons, I believe that Michael Scott should lose and the EEOC should not be requiring me to turn over my sources. That is an effective intro. It tells me what your position is. It tells me the reasons why you feel like you're going to win. I also got, I'm here today to represent Michael Scott. I believe that Michael Scott is the victim of defamation and he should be awarded damages. That's accurate, right? We like accuracy, but it's not punchy. It's not effective. It's not your appeal to emotion. It's not a way to synthesize not only this particular case, but also why this case is important in a more general term. When it comes to answering questions, if I ask you a yes or no question, what should be the first thing out of your mouth? Yes, no. I don't expect you to have the perfect answer, locked and loaded, but if I ask you a yes or no question, tell me whether it's yes or no, and then explain why it's going to be yes or no. And the other thing that I think especially happens to people when they are nervous, which I very much understand, is when people are nervous, I find that they tend to start talking and then kind of figure it out as they go along, which is something that I do when I'm nervous. You will not have any points taken off for taking a beat. So if I ask you a question, pause, then answer. That's okay. I don't expect you to have a locked and loaded scripted answer to every single question I might ask you. I want you to process that information. Now, don't sit there for 30 seconds and say, I don't know. That's not helpful. But taking a beat is better than starting your answer with a bunch of filler words and nonsense and then kind of, oh, it clicking. Because I can always tell when it clicks for you guys. When you figure out what you want to say and then the answer starts. The problem is that it's 10 seconds in and you've already been started talking. So, and now I actually am looking at the chat today, so that's good. Does anybody have any questions about the questions about the oral argument or anything that they didn't make sense that they want to ask about? You also are free to email me your questions, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. The last oral argument will not be till the last week of April, so you have some time. Additionally, on a housekeeping note, your legal analyses have been graded, or everybody who turned one in should have had it graded. If you didn't, please let me know. I imagine a lot of you guys are going to be disappointed with your initial grade, and that is okay. It is a rough draft. It was sent for the purpose of improvement. What I would very much encourage you guys to do is the single most important piece of information I posted online for this assignment was my sample question and my sample answer. Because you should be able to look at it and it's going to follow the same structure. Because more often than not, the people who got grades that maybe not are happy with, it's not because they got the answer wrong. A lot of times the answers are pretty good. But it's important to look at this more as a research paper than simply reaching the correct conclusion. Not only do you want to tell me what you believe the conclusion is, but you want to tell me how you got there. Because you are writing for an ignorant audience. You are writing for an audience who has never in a million years heard about defamation, heard about obscenity. So you've got to explain those topics to them and then tell me what the answer is. So those will be due in about 2 weeks. I'll post a due date. Don't worry about that. So let's then move on to the actual thing we're going to be talking about today. And that is two things. We're going to be talking about the ability to record conversations. And we are going to be talking about, that's not it, the ability for individuals to monetize their likeness, especially if they happen to be celebrities. So, get this pulled up. There we go. All right, and so what we're going to do is we're going to start with a recording made of Harvey Weinstein. Now, I hope that most of you guys will know who Harvey Weinstein is. I imagine most of you do. And one of the things that came out when Harvey Weinstein was really being exposed was a conversation he had with an Italian actress who alleges, with a fair amount of substance behind it, that Harvey Weinstein groped her without consent. Now, it's not a fun listen, and I understand if you don't want to listen to it. So there's no requirement. But we're still going to play it because I want you to think about who was aware that this recording was being made.
I'm telling you right now.
What do we have to do here?
Nothing. I'm going to take a shower. You sit there and have a drink. Water.
I don't drink. Can I stay on the bar?
No, you must come here now.
No.
Please.
No, I don't want to.
I'm not doing anything with you. I'm not even embarrassing me.
I'm sorry. I
No,
cannot.
come in
No,
here.
yesterday was a kind of aggressive for me. I need to know a person
I
to be
won't
touched.
do a thing.
I don't.
Everything, please. I swear I won't. Just sit with me. Don't embarrass me in the hotel. I'm here all the time.
I
Sit
know,
with me.
but I don't
promise.
want to.
Please sit there. Please. 1 minute.
No,
I
I
ask
can't.
you. Go to the bathroom.
Please, I don't want to do something I don't want
Go
to.
to the bathroom. Come here. Listen to me.
I want to go downstairs.
I'm not going to do anything. You'll never see me again after this. Okay? That's it. If you embarrass me in this hotel,
I'm not
stay.
embarrassing you. It's just that I don't feel comfortable.
I mean, don't have a fight with me in the
It's not
hallway.
nice.
Please, I'm not going to do anything. I swear, my children. Please come in. On everything. I'm a famous guy.
I'm feeling very uncomfortable right
Please
now.
come in now. And 1 minute. And if you want to leave, when the guy comes with my
Why
jacket, you can
yesterday
go.
you touched my breast?
Oh, please, I'm sorry. Just come on. I'm used to that. Come on.
Are you used to that?
Yes, come in. Because
No, but I'm not used to
I
that.
won't do it again. Come on. Sit here. Sit here for a minute, please.
No, I don't want to.
If you do this now, you will embarrass me. I know. Like, never call me again. Okay? I'm sorry. I promise you I won't do anything.
I know, but yesterday was too
The
much
guy's
for
coming.
me.
I will never do another thing to you. 5 minutes. Don't ruin your friendship with me for 5 minutes.
I know, but it's kind of like, it's too much for me. I can't.
Please, you're making a big scene here.
No,
Please.
but I want to leave.
Okay, bye. Thank you.
Meanwhile, CBS News has learned that just hours before he was fired by his own company, Harvey Weinstein sent a letter asking other Hollywood executives to support him. In that letter, he wrote, quote, "I am desperate for your help."
All right. Everybody can hear me now, I hope. So there is... Was Harvey Weinstein aware that that recording was being made, do you think? Almost certainly not, right? And that raises an interesting legal question. Do you need somebody's permission to record conversations? And the answer is one of the few areas in this class where law is going to vary significantly by the state that you are in. So federal law requires one individual who is a party to the conversation to consent to the recording of that conversation. Just one. Now, what does this prevent? This prevents wiretapping. Wiretapping is a term that essentially means bugging somebody or eavesdropping on a conversation. If I am calling my friend and we are talking on the phone and there's an FBI agent listening in on that conversation, that is wiretapping. That is illegal without a specific warrant, a wiretapping warrant. Because that FBI agent is not a party to the conversation. Neither me or my friend are aware that they are listening in and are party to it. But if I am talking to my friend and my friend knows that they're talking to me and I decide to hit a little button on my phone that records the conversation, under federal law, perfectly legal. If I am talking to a group of people say 30 people, and we're all on a Zoom call, and one of the people records that Zoom call, then they are in the clear, because it's a 30-person conversation, and one person consented to the recording, the person making the recording. Now, some states, that is the federal rule, and that is the rule for majority of states. However, some states require the consent of all parties to a conversation before a recording can be made. Now, I honestly don't know if you guys see this, but I record every class, so I can put it on YouTube later and have it for my own records. Whenever I do that, a little thing pops up on Google Hangouts or Google Meet or whatever this is called, and it says, please be aware that you are going to be recording, and that in some states you're required to get the consent of all parties before making a recording of any conversation. This is being recorded, and I am happy to tell you guys that I'm recording it. I imagine you guys can see that it's being recorded. I've never actually been on the other end of this, so I don't know for sure. But yeah, I imagine you guys can see it's being recorded as well. I don't have to tell you under state law if I don't want to. So let's look at how these two laws, two different versions, approach each other. In states called one-party consent states in federal law is exactly what I just said. As long as one person is consenting to the recording, you're good to go. Now, this is going to be 37 states plus the District of Columbia. It is going to include places like New York and here, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. On the other end of the spectrum is something called two-party consent states, more accurately defined as all-party consent states. Again, all parties in a conversation must consent to a recording being made. Now, California state law, I'm going to read it in full, because it says, every person who intentionally and without the consent of all parties to a confidential communication by means of any electronic amplifying or recording device eavesdrops upon or records the confidential communication. Now I'm curious, if we were in California and I did not get everybody's permission before I recorded this class, I just recorded it. You guys weren't aware of it, you never said that it was okay, I just decided to do it. I would still probably be okay. I would still probably not be in trouble with recording the conversation. Can you tell me why? Because again, it just says all parties. I didn't get your recording. I don't get your permission to record it. So it should be illegal, but it probably isn't. And you know why? Okay, so I might be using a third-party service, right? And you probably agreed to it when you signed on that it might be. But even if I wasn't, even if it was just everybody was in class, let's put it a different way, right? Everybody's in class and I just turn voice memos on my phone and I record it for my own records. Alice says, because you're students. No, you guys are students, you're adults, you have the same rights as every other full-blooded American when you enter into this classroom.
Because you're federal?
Really? We are in public. Kind of. I'm giving a lecture. I'm giving a public presentation. I don't expect anybody in here to keep what I tell you guys a secret. Now, when you call your friend and you are having a conversation with your friend, there's an expectation of privacy there. You have an expectation that people aren't going to listen in and kind of know what you're telling your friend. Even if it's mundane, there's still an expectation of privacy here. Or there. Here, in this classroom, there is no expectation of privacy. So it's only going to count for confidential communications. Another example of this is if I am in a restaurant and I'm talking to my wife and we're having a conversation, I would expect that nobody's going to slide their phone over and record our conversation when we're talking at a low, reasonable voice. Now, if my wife and I get into an argument, we start shouting and throwing chairs and everything like you would see on Real Housewives of Orange County, and somebody pulls out their phone and records it and puts it on YouTube, well, again, I didn't give my consent for that. The people in that restaurant are not a party to this communication. But once we started shouting at each other, it sure as hell is no longer confidential. So it's only going to be confidential communications where there is no real expectation of privacy, and that's what we're looking at here. The definition for a confidential communication are conversations in which one of the parties has an objectively reasonable expectation that no one is listening in or overhearing the conversation. So, if I've gone off the deep end, and I think everybody else in that restaurant when I'm fighting, or having that loud argument with my wife, I think in my subjective brain that everybody else in there is deaf, or everybody else in there speaks Portuguese only, and I'm the only English speaker, and nobody else can understand. Well, okay, I think that the conversation is still confidential, because I don't think anybody else can understand me or hear me. But that is not objectively reasonable. We're not going to spend too much time on it. It's just not all that relevant all that often. But these laws were written a long time ago, usually in the 60s and the 70s, or sometimes even earlier, back when we first started getting the idea of recording conversations. But let's say that a movie producer in New York calls a movie producer in LA. And they, one movie producer does not disclose that they are recording the conversation. Well, in New York, that's fine, because you only need one party to consent to the recording. In California, that would be illegal. It's confidential communication. Both of the parties involved in the conversation didn't give their consent. So should New York law apply? Or should California law apply? The answer is generally, but it is subject to it's a case-by-case basis. It's not a hard and fast rule. Generally, the two-party consent will apply, typically. But they'll be looking at things like who actually made the recording. Where is the, how important is this particular case, right? How important is it to apply New York law against somebody who's from California or vice versa? But it's something that is interesting to think about. Super brief conversation, right? I used to spend almost an entire class on this. It really boils down to this. Are you working under federal law, or do you live in one of these 37 states? In which case, record away. Everybody you come into contact with, expect that they are recording your conversations. Now, there is an exception for things like revenge porn laws. Again, that is very much outside the scope of this class. So it doesn't mean that you can record literally everything you do in private. It simply means that when we're talking about conversations, it does not apply to images. It does not apply to movies. It does not apply to those sorts of things. It is going to be audio conversations, by and large. Again, these laws were written in the 60s and 70s, and a lot of times they just haven't caught up yet. And then you have legislatures passing really well-meaning and I think really important laws that criminalize things like revenge porn and, intimate pictures and videos being leaked. But a lot of times these laws are going to come into conflict, and there's not a lot of guidance as to how that conflict is resolved. But by and large, if you are, especially, we're not talking about audio, 37 states and federal law, as long as one person hits that record button, you're fine. If you live in California or Massachusetts, those are the two big ones, you need to get everybody's consent in order to report it. If it's in public, if the conversation is not meant to be confidential, then record away, because these laws are not going to be applicable. All right. So let's start the next section off with the hypothetical. In April of 2014, Katherine Heigl sues Duane Reade for posting the following picture on Twitter. And for those of you who can't see, it is Duane Reade. Duane Reade is the CVS of New York. If you ever go to New York, there are a ton of them everywhere. Basically a drugstore. And it says, love a quick Duane Reade run. Even Katherine Heigl can't resist shopping NYC's favorite drugstore. Now, Katherine Heigl is not getting paid by Duane Reade. Katherine Heigl did not give her permission for her picture to be used to advertise Duane Reade. So she sues. And she sues alleging a violation of New York's civil rights statute. So the same law that protects people from being discriminated against, tries to prevent racial profiling and racial discrimination and sexual discrimination, and these really important and really high-minded ideas. All of a sudden we got the girl from Knocked Up and Grey's Anatomy using it to sue a drugstore. How does that compute? Well, let's look at it. Let's kind of walk through exactly why. So we're going to be talking here about celebrities' ability to monetize their likeness. Endorsements, advertising, what they can and cannot prevent when it comes to their likeness being used. So let's start with a broad definition. It is defined as a tort that prevents the use of an individual's likeness, voice, persona for commercial purposes without their consent, and grants these individuals exclusive rights in assigning the rights of their likeness. That is a lot of legal mumbo jumbo. Essentially, what it says is this. If somebody's likeness has a value, they are in control of how that value is utilized or not. This is state law. There is no federal law for this. Now, there is some trademark stuff that or consumer protection stuff, or false identification of the source of goods stuff, or like there's some stuff in federal law, especially in the Trademark Act, which is called the Lanham Act, that we'll talk about a little bit later on in the semester. But basically, when somebody sues somebody else because they violated their likeness, they're going to be suing in state court. Now, most celebrities are going to sue in either New York or California state court. Can anybody tell me why that might be? There are two pretty good reasons for it. How many A-list movie stars are living in Tennessee? Actually, maybe a few, because there's Nashville. How many A-list movie stars are living in Minnesota? Now that Prince is dead, probably none. So, okay. They all live there. And if you are New York or LA, who are some of your most reliable political donors? Celebrities. The people who have a lot of money and a lot of political activism. Anybody who watches the Oscars can tell you just how politically active celebrities like to be. Which is fine. I'm not discounting that. You know, everybody has a voice, everybody has a platform. But if you're a celebrity and you're donating to a political campaign, are you also going to make sure that that person supports your right to sue as many people as you can when you're put on a billboard without your consent? The answer is yes. So we're really going to be looking at New York or California, but most states have some version of this. It's just New York and California have the most well-rounded and robust case law and statutory protections for celebrities. Now, why do we have this? Is it just because we like LeBron James and want to make his life as easy as possible? No. The underlying policy is this. I am famous. I'm not famous. I will never be famous. But say I am famous. My face has value. People want my autograph. People want me in commercials. I'm going to get paid $3 million as opposed to $30,000 to be in a movie, not because I'm a better actor than the guy who's going to charge $30,000, but because people are going to go to that movie because my name is on it. And they're going to be able to put up a billboard with my face on it in Times Square, and people are going to go see it because they like me as an actor. Right? There is value associated with that in the same way that you have value associated with a stock or a piece of land or actual cash value. So we're talking about a likeness. We have a monetary interest, a proprietary interest in that individual's likeness. Number two, that value is inherent to the celebrity. Despite what the movie Face Off might tell you, I cannot transfer my face to somebody else and give them the value in my likeness. It is personal to me and rises and falls with me as an individual. And when it comes to controlling and monetizing my likeness, there is both the economic impact of that, but also the personal impact on it. We're going to be talking about endorsements. I don't care how much money the Ku Klux Klan is going to give a lot of celebrities to be their new celebrity spokesman. I imagine most, if not all, celebrity spokespeople or celebrities are going to say, nope, I'm good. Because not only because they might make some money, but it's going to seriously impact their brand, seriously impact them. They're also just going to have moral objections to it. And so the ability to monetize the likeness also includes the ability to not monetize it, to reserve it. There are a lot of celebrities who are not going to do endorsements or do commercials. So let's look at celebrity endorsements. I do hope this works.
These days, the recession has everyone looking for ways to make a few extra bucks. But celebrities have an extra option. They can make commercials that are only seen overseas. Here's CBS News correspondent Sheila McVicker.
We in the killing Nazi business.
Don't give up the day job, as the saying goes, and it applies to celebrities as well as lesser mortals. But what's an actor to do when not on the red carpet? Welcome to the lucrative world of advertising, pitching products, especially if you're overseas fans. Somehow, this will convince Japanese consumers to buy cell phones. Brad Pitt is not the only one selling his celluloid famous face. Scores of other actors have found foreign commercials to be a quick, if cheesy, way to earn cash. Kevin Costner is particularly busy, flying Turkish Airlines. And in an ad for Fiat, the car that has everything, except it doesn't come with George Clooney. Snoop Dogg does a turn as a German folk singer for Weidmobile. Tommy Lee Jones plays a hard-done-by servant who takes on the boss in table tennis in an ad for coffee.
Let me through!
And Kiefer Sutherland sends up his own Macho 24 image.
A ring-a-ding-ding?
Yeah.
Hollywood stars making ads even inspired a movie. Lost in Translation follows an American actor's trip to Japan to film an ad for Suntory brand whiskey. Why do it?
First of all, they love money, but second, they love being busy. And when the casting directors stop calling, the idea, perhaps we'll just fit a little advert in, remind ourselves that somebody loves us.
It's not just actors who have felt the lure of the lucre. Henry Kissinger pushed The Economist magazine.
It's Henry Kissinger.
Even the former leader of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, sells pricey handbags in exchange for a hefty donation to his foundation promoting a better world. Japan has traditionally been avid for ads, but stars have been flocking to Brazil. Sarah Jessica Parker was paid just over $500,000 for this appearance for a Brazilian shopping mall. The strong currency made getting such stars suddenly affordable for ad makers there. With a payday worth hundreds of thousands of dollars for, let's face it, just a few seconds of work, you can understand the attraction. Sheila McVicker, CBS News, London.
All right, so this is a big business. These celebrity endorsements. So let's look at a case that kind of really illustrates what we're talking about here. Now, there's a case called Zucchini versus Scripps Howard Broadcasting. And in 1972, Howard Zucchini performed what he called a human cannonball trick. Now, I imagine all of you guys have seen some version of this either in person or on TV, right? Some guy gets in a cannon at one end of a football stadium, everybody goes, yay, they go, boom, and he goes all the way over the other side and he lands in a net and everybody's very impressed. And in 1972, this was like the thing to do because he didn't have cable. And the nightly news for the local station went down. They filmed Zucchini getting into the cannon. They saw him go boom and go all the way over the other side. And then they landed the net and they said, great, cut it. Let's put it on the 6 o'clock news. And he sued. Zucchini sued. He was like, look, my entire living is getting in this cannon and going boom and going over the other side, right? And that's my entire thing. And you have devalued my performance by taking it and putting it on the nightly news. Because if people could just watch my thing on the nightly news, then they have no reason to pay to get into the state fair to see me do it. And so the issue became, does the First Amendment insulate news organizations from state tort claims like this, like appropriation, like invasion of the right of publicity for celebrities? Now, again, it is important to note that we're not talking about trademark or copyright here, and you might not think that that's important now, but when we get to the end of the semester and you're thinking, are we talking about copyright, talking about trademark? We are not talking about either. This is a civil right that we're talking about here. This is something that is important that is inherent to the individual. Now, there are a lot of reasons this is not going to be copyright. The first is that Zucchini was not the first guy to get into a cannon and shoot across a football stadium. And number two, it's not really all that creative. It's not artistic, traditional sense. And the decision, the majority decision, is interesting. They found for Zucchini. They found for the human cannonball. Because they said, look, A, how newsworthy is this story really, right? Now, we're not one to really, go back and criticize the individuals, or we're not going to go criticize the newspaper editors or the broadcast news editors. It's really not that newsworthy. And not only is it not newsworthy, but you took the entire thing. Now, I know it's not a long clip, but you took him getting into the cannon, you saw him going across, and you saw him landing. You literally took his entire performance. And while we're not dealing with copyright here, it would be similar in terms of what can a news organization take in order to tell a story effectively. It would be like putting, if you want to review the Avengers Endgame movie, and on the nightly news you played all 3 hours of the Avengers Endgame movie and then came on and said, good. Yes, okay, that's news. You're giving an opinion, but you took way more than you needed to in order to make that point. Kind of similar here. And the rationale, again, is about the value associated with the celebrity. When we're talking about copyright, as we will towards the end of this class, or the end of the semester, when I create something, when I write a script, or I write a song, or I film a movie, I am creating a separate entity that has value. It's its own individual little piece of intellectual property. And that intellectual property can be sold, it can be grown, it can be diminished, right? It's a separate thing apart from me. I no longer I have the right to give it away, or I have the right to retain it. Here, we're talking about the value of the person. fairly similarly to the way we talked about the value of somebody's reputation in defamation and libel law. And so if somebody takes my likeness and they show my entire performance, or they show my entire gambit or my entire trick, it dilutes my value. Much in the same way that when you tell a lie about somebody that is defamatory, it diminishes the value in their reputation. So this is similar policy to why we don't allow copyright infringement or trademark infringement, but it's really important to know that we're talking about the celebrity themselves, not the thing that they create. Okay, so let's get to the actual black letter law here. In order to maintain a claim for violation of someone's right of publicity, all of the following must be present. The use of someone's name, identity, likeness, or persona, through which the defendant received some commercial advantage. That is going to be an incredibly important word, commercial. It's only going to be commercial advantage. The use of which was made without the person's consent, and there is financial injury to the plaintiff or the celebrity. Now, North Carolina doesn't actually have a specific law on this. They don't have a right of publicity or misappropriation law on the books, because we just don't have a lot of celebrities here. We got Orson Scott Card, the guy who wrote Ender's Game. I'm sure there are other celebrities. Michael Jordan lives here, right? I think he lives in Charlotte. So like, it's there, but it's not a big thing. So it was actually, the structure in North Carolina for this law actually comes from court decisions from like the 1905, 1908 time period. But again, we don't have a ton of celebrities suing people in North Carolina. They're going to be suing in New York, California, maybe Illinois. So let's get to what is a likeness. Likeness is more than just a face. It can include their name, their image, and this would include both actual pictures of them as well as representations of them through drawings and things of that nature. Voice, actual or sound-alike, signature, short phrase tied to a celebrity. Look up this guy's name because I'm. Does anybody know? And I just had to look it up myself because I forgot. Does anybody know who the guy on the right is? It is Michael Buffer. Who? Michael. I think there's a Bruce Buffer who does the UFC fights. I think. There's a Real Sports about it that I watched several years ago and now can't remember. Let's Get Ready to Rumble is one of the more famous phrases that we hear, right? It's before boxing matches. People use it in commercials. It is literally all Michael Buffer does. Is he puts on his tuxedo, he goes to boxing matches, and he goes, "Let's get ready to rumble." He says it very big. I'm not going to do it here. And we know how much Michael Buffer's worth for doing that one thing? $400 million. $400 million. Because not only is Michael Buffer's voice and face part of his identity, but he has made Let's Get Ready to Rumble such a core part of his identity that it is now as personal to him as a name, a face, or a signature. Let's look at name.
I grill
with
George.
I grill with George. George.
Yo cocino con George.
I grill with George too.
America's favorite grill is America's favorite gift. Get a George Foreman lean, mean, fat-reducing grilling machine for someone you love.
Hey, that's my line.
George Foreman made a heck of a lot more money selling grills than he ever did in the boxing ring. And he was able to do so because it says the George Foreman Grill. That's what I thought George Foreman did until I was like 12 or 13 years old. I did not know he was a boxer for the first 10 to 11 years of my life, at least. And that is because George Foreman's name has a value. People saw him fighting Muhammad Ali and liked George Foreman. Not entirely sure why they thought that he would be able to knock out the fat, because does not seem like a svelte individual. But, you know, it was one of the more popular kitchen items of the late 90s and early 2000s. The George Foreman Grill. And you'll see this a lot in the shoe business as well. The LeBron James Air Jordans. And that is the extent of my basketball shoe knowledge. I know that there are a lot of them, but I got no. I think Puma as Zion or something. I don't know. But that is going to be, you're buying those shoes because they got LeBron James's name on them or Kanye West's name on them. And that's fine, right? People want to be like celebrities, or they see that LeBron James is endorsing a product. And if he's able to do what he does on the basketball court, well, then maybe I should have those shoes too. Not downplaying it, it works. And for all I know is true. I'm sure LeBron James does play better in his $300 Nikes than he would in $15 Walmart shoes. Okay, so we got voice as well. And what I want you guys to do is, and I'm not sure if anybody's going to know the actual song, but if you do know the song, let me know who you think sings it. I want you to listen to it, and we'll go from there.
Now there's a car that just asks to be driven.
You're my lover man, oh baby.
Mercury is bringing a sophisticated new shape to the American road. Introducing Sable. Mercury, the shape you want to be in.
Okay, so I love that commercial for a couple of reasons. Not only because it plays into what we're going to be talking about here, but also in order to sell the Mercury Sable, they show it spinning out of control for majority of it and then driving off the end of a dock, which I'm not really sure is how I'm supposed to treat a car, but maybe I'm wrong. But also, there's the song, Do You Want to Dance? Does anybody know who sings Do You Want to Dance? She is also an actress that was in the second season of The Politician, which like me and 3 other people saw. Not bad. Okay, Bette Midler. She's also in Hocus Pocus, which I've not seen, but everybody else seems to have. And that sounds a heck of a lot like Bette Midler, for those of you who know who Bette Midler is. But it's not. It is a lookalike. Here's what happened. So in 1986, Mercury had their new car, the Sable. They wanted to have a nice romantic song to go over the top of it. and they contacted the individual, the company who owned the copyright to "Do You Want to Dance?" And they said, "We would like to use this in our commercial, please." They said, "Great." They worked out a contract, and the record company got some money, and Mercury got their song. You know who did not get contacted? Bette Midler. And Bette Midler said, "Look, I'm a serious actress, or I'm not getting paid enough, or I just plain don't want to do it. Do not use my voice." They said, "Okay, we can do that." So they hired a Bette Midler sound-alike to sing it for her. Now, from a copyright perspective, that is okay. It is perfectly fine because the record company owned the lyrics. The record company owned the sheet music. They can re-record it all day long if they wanted to with somebody who sounds nothing like Bette Midler or a heck of a lot like Bette Midler. So she couldn't sue for copyright infringement. But she sued saying, "Look, my voice, Bette Midler's voice, just as much as Bette Midler's face has value. And people are going to hear that song, and they are going to take it as an endorsement of that product. They think that not only is Bette Midler singing 'Do You Want to Dance?', but that Bette Midler wants you to go out and buy a Mercury Sable." So it's not just the actual voice. It's because, again, we're not really protecting the voice itself. What we are doing is we are protecting the celebrity's right to control what they endorse and what they do not endorse, what they appear on and what they do not appear on. And if you are somebody just watching a Sunday football game in 1986, do you know the difference between a Bette Midler sound-alike and Bette Midler? No, all you know is you think that's Bette Midler. So these weird little technicalities aren't really going to be valid because they don't advance the interest for why we have the law. The image is pretty easy. Somebody's actual face is going to be part of their likeness. Again, though, impersonators can be prohibited. Now, this is a significantly ickier case than when it first came out, but you guys know who Woody Allen is. I think calling him a controversial figure is a mild way of putting it. But, you know, in the 1970s and 1980s and 1990s, Woody Allen was like a big deal. He was like Mr. New York. And what a department store did is they hired a Woody Allen impersonator to stand outside of their department store and do kooky Woody Allen things. Woody Allen sued. And the department store said, like, "Look, we're not taking your likeness. This isn't Woody Allen. It just looks like Woody Allen." They said, "No, you're still doing the same thing. You're still using their likeness to get a commercial advantage." So let's look at right of publicity and why we care. And why it is, I've been using incredibly carefully, actually, celebrities. Celebrity likeness. And that comes down to the issue of harm. The harm that is suffered is not the pain and emotional fragility of these celebrities for having their likeness used without their consent. It's not because they don't actually endorse the product and they're getting the impression that they are not. This is not a false light claim. It is not a defamation claim. This is, my likeness is worth X amount of money, $1 million. If somebody can take it without paying me for it, we know from basic supply and demand economics that if you increase the supply, that it is going to decrease the demand. And if you increase free supply, it is going to obliterate the demand for paying for it. So if I have $1 million in my likeness, somebody used my likeness without permission, my $1 million all of a sudden goes down to $800,000. And I would like you to give me that $200,000 to make me whole again, please. How much value is in my likeness? John Boschini, hopefully not horrible professor of media law at UNC Greensboro, and moderately interesting small-town lawyer. If I say buy Raisin Bran, are you guys going out and buying Raisin Bran? Probably not. If I go to a random group of people and say, John Bischini, moderately successful lawyer from Greensboro, North Carolina, says buy Raisin Bran, is anybody buying Raisin Bran? No. My value, my commercial value in my likeness is exactly $0. I was terrible at math. I will freely admit that the worst grade I got in college was in remedial math or introduction to math or whatever the heck it was called. I have no qualms with my terribleness at math, but I can understand this. If I reduce the value of 0 by 20%, how much is left? What is that number? 20% of 0 is what? 0. So somebody uses my likeness without my permission. They put it in a commercial, and I don't get permission. I sue them. They say, yes, we did it. What are your damages? And the court looks at how much my likeness was devalued, and they give me a grand total of $0 in damages. So is the answer, this is only something for celebrities? The answer is you darn right it is. And that's not because we don't care about people or common people or whatever else. We will look next class at how private people can be protected. But we got to look at the individualized torts. Okay. So I've always found this super interesting. I'm not sure if you guys do, but I do. That when we are looking at death, unlike protection for defamation, the right of publicity and the protection that comes with it can extend after death. And it's going to vary wildly by state law. It is actually one of the very few instances, again, in which state law is going to vary so widely. So if in California, for example, if I'm a celebrity and I die tomorrow, my ability to monetize my likeness will pass down through my estate to somebody, in the same way that when Tolkien died, the rights to Lord of the Rings passed down onto his children. And my heirs, whatever they happen to be, will have control over how my likeness is used or not used for 70 years. So if I die in 2021, then my descendants will be able to monetize my likeness and control my likeness until 2091. In New York, it is 0 years. Now, what law applies, what law should apply, that gets it very complicated, and we're not in a civil procedure class. And also, it's important that federal law does prohibit using a dead celebrity's likeness for false endorsement of a product or service. So even if you're in New York and somebody dies and a company says, recently deceased actor loved this product and wanted you to buy this product. Okay, that is illegal, but because it creates a false impression, it misleads consumers. Which again, is important but different. There, the punishment would be protecting the public, not continuing to maintain the value in somebody's estate or in somebody's likeness. Now, again, how this is a little bit different than trademark, which we'll talk about in a few classes. In trademark, you need to show that a consumer is likely to be confused by the trademark infringement. I have a Nike swoosh, and the word Nike on it. If I have an actual check mark and call my shoes Bikey, then somebody might be confused and think that I am Nike, right? We actually got to show consumer confusion. Here, we don't got to show that. We don't have to show, like, for example, if the KKK was being particularly terrible on a day and decided to use LeBron James as their new celebrity spokesperson and not give LeBron James any money or any of the heads up that he's going to be the new face of the KKK. How many people are actually going to think that all of a sudden LeBron James is a white supremacist? I imagine very few. But that's not relevant. Because again, we're not looking at the public necessarily. What we're doing is we're looking at the D-value of the likeness. Instead, the plaintiff only needs to show that he or she had a commercial interest in their likeness and that the likeness had been commercially exploited. And this, again, is federal law, which we're going to just very briefly talk about because we talk about it more in trademark. But essentially what I just said. Right of publicity is largely up to the states, but North Carolina has a very thin protection, very threadbare. Not non-existent, but it's really not all that robust because we just haven't had a lot of celebrities and not a real political push to enact a law that very few people are going to be able to take advantage of. So federal law does provide some very basic protections to celebrities, and that is Section 43A of the Lanham Act. I do not expect you to quote me Section 43A. I don't expect you to know that it is 43A, but it prohibits the use of a person's identity in such a way that consumers are likely to be misled about a person's sponsorship or approval of a product or service. Essentially, it criminalizes the act of making the public believe that somebody endorses the product when they actually don't. So even if LeBron James lived in North Carolina and the KKK decided to use his image, and North Carolina doesn't provide a lot of protection for people like LeBron James because they're a celebrity, he would still be able to take advantage of Section 43A of the Lanham Act. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to end class with what I think is relatively funny. It's kind of an old clip, but I think is really good. And what I want you guys to do is, over the weekend, I want you to think about why this is or is not a invasion or on the individual's right of publicity.
This week,
all right, so Jay Pharoah used everybody's likeness. We already talked about how impersonators are not protected. So why didn't Dave Chappelle and Cat Williams and everybody sue Jay Pharoah? And assume that it's not just because they're good guys. You can laugh at themselves. So think about that. We'll talk about it on Monday. And I hope to see more of you guys in class. If not, I have no problem moving this all the way to online if that's what you guys prefer. So talk to you Monday, and I hope you have a great weekend.